3. MV Trade Daring. Built in 1972, the 873-foot-long MV Trade Daring was a Cypriot-owned tanker that transported raw materials around the world. The ship was bound for France, but never reached its destination. It crushed under the weight of its load and broke in half on November 11, 1994, while being loaded with manganese ore at Ponta do Madeira in Brazil. A few months later, in early 1995, the two halves of the Trade Daring were scuttled at sea. It's uncommon but not unheard of for large ships to break in half. In 2021, for example, the 656-foot-long cargo ship Crimson Polaris ran aground and snapped in two near the northern Japanese port of Hachinohe. The Panamanian flag vessel was nearing its final destination with a load of wood chips from Thailand when strong winds blew it into the shallow waters where it got stuck. A 3-mile-long oil slick trailed behind it as it lost part of its cargo. Luckily, all 21 crew members aboard were safely rescued. The stern sank and the remaining front section was towed to port. In yet another shocking example of an enormous ship breaking in half, the 1,037-foot-long Japanese-built container ship MOL Comfort broke in two while en route from Singapore to Jeddah in 2013. The vessel suffered a crack amid bad weather, roughly 230 miles off the Yemeni coast, and gave way to hogging, which happens when a ship's beam is curved upward. All 26 crew members were rescued by nearby container ships. Surprisingly, the two halves of the Comfort initially remained afloat, with most of the 4,382 cargo containers intact. A salvage mission was undertaken in an attempt to tow the sections to safety. The stern section took on water and sank 13,000 feet to the seafloor before the operation to save it could begin. It only took a few minutes for it to slip beneath the waves, scattering cargo containers that soon followed to their watery grave. Meanwhile, 4 tugboats began towing the bow section, but soon began running into problems. First, the tow line broke free during bad weather. It was reattached, and the effort resumed until a few days later, when a fire broke out in the rear of the bow section. The tugboats requested help from the Indian Coast Guard as they battled to get the blaze under control in bad weather, but nearly all the cargo containers were destroyed. Any cargo that remained intact was never salvaged, but instead came down with the half ship and came to rest at a depth of 9,800 feet. While lost cargo amounts to a lot of money down the drain, the most important priority when it comes to a ship in distress is to save as many human lives as possible. The crews of the Trade Daring, Crimson Polaris, and MOL Comfort were lucky to emerge from the wrecks unscathed. It doesn't always turn out that way, as the crew of the engineering vessel Fujing 001 learned in 2022. The 670-foot-long ship's 30 crew members were working on an offshore wind project off the Hong Kong coast when they got caught up in Typhoon Chaba. The Fujing 001 broke in half and started to sink as crew members called for rescue. Unfortunately, strong winds and waves prevented emergency responders from reaching the vessel. A helicopter arrived just before it went under and managed to save 4 crew members. The rescue mission soon became a recovery effort. 12 bodies were found, while the remaining 14 crew members were presumed dead. Do you think you could ever work on a boat for weeks or months at a time? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 2. Exxon Valdez oil spill. The 988-foot-long supertanker Exxon Valdez was en route to Long Beach, California with 53 million gallons of crude oil in 1989 when it ran aground in Prince William Sound, Alaska. It struck a well-known navigational hazard called Bligh Reef just minutes after midnight on March 24th, tearing the ship's hull and causing millions of gallons of crude oil to spill into the water. Authorities rushed to try containing the spill, but initially failed to get it under control. Over the following months, the oil slick continued to spread, eventually covering around 1,300 miles of coastline. The remote location of the spill was only accessible by boat, plane, or helicopter, complicating the response to the disaster. A multi-billion-dollar cleanup effort was undertaken by federal responders, Exxon employees, and more than 11,000 Alaska residents. Workers rescued and cleaned animals, skimmed oil from the water's surface, sprayed oil dispersant chemicals which break oil down into small droplets and make it easier to clean, and sprayed oil-covered beaches with hot water. Despite the dedicated efforts to clean up the spill as quickly as possible, the disaster wreaked havoc on the region's wildlife, killing an estimated 250,000 seabirds, 3,000 otters, 300 seals, 250 bald eagles, and 22 orcas. It's also believed that the spill contributed to the collapse of the salmon and herring industries in Prince William Sound during the early 1990s. As of 2001, lingering oil contamination was found at dozens of sites along the shoreline. To this day, the herring population has failed to recover, and it took 25 years before the region's seal population recovered to its pre-spill levels in 2014. An investigation found that third mate Gregory Cousins was at the helm when the Exxon Valdez ran aground. He was unlicensed to steer the ship and failed to return to the proper shipping lane after diverting around some icebergs, at which point the crash occurred. Captain Joseph Hazelwood was in his stateroom at the time of the accident. He admitted to having drunk 2 or 3 vodkas at least 6 hours before the crash and was accused of being drunk when it happened. Until then, Hazelwood had a pristine track record as a ship captain. He became the youngest Exxon captain in 1978 at age 32. In 1985, he successfully guided an asphalt carrier to safety during harsh weather, sparing the crew from having to abandon ship. But the captain struggled with alcohol abuse. His driver's license was suspended or revoked 3 times in the state of New York for alcohol-related incidents starting in 1984. In 1985, he went to rehab and then started attending Alcoholics Anonymous. But Hazelwood fell off the wagon again in 1988 when he caught a DUI charge. His driver's license was suspended at the time of the accident. Despite Hazelwood's troubled history with alcohol, prosecutors failed to convince the court that he was intoxicated when the crash occurred, and he was acquitted of any alcohol-related charges. He was convicted of misdemeanor negligence and fined $50,000 and was also ordered to perform 1,000 hours of community service. Exxon fired Hazelwood, and he spent 8 years appealing his conviction before he finally gave up the fight and started his community service. A few months after the spill, the Exxon Valdez was towed to San Diego for repairs. At one point, Exxon tried returning the vessel to its North American fleet, but it was soon banned from operating in US waters. It operated under various names in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, before being removed from service in 2002 when the European Union banned single-hulled oil tankers. In 2008, a Hong Kong-based shipping company bought the vessel, converted it into an ore carrier, and renamed it the Dongfang Ocean. It was scrapped 4 years later in 2012. The disaster influenced the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which imposed harsher penalties on companies that are found responsible for oil spills. It also requires all oil tankers in the US to be double-hulled, which is why the Exxon Valdez could no longer operate in the country even after it was repaired. Hazelwood finally apologized for the disaster in 2009, specifically extending his remorse to the people of Alaska. But he said that the truth about what really happened is out there, implying that he doesn't believe he's at fault for the accident, and he claimed that the reason the facts weren't widely reported was because they made the story far less juicy than the narrative the media chose to put forth. Although his master's license remains valid to this day, he struggled to secure any sort of long-term work as a ship captain. The Exxon Valdez disaster was the largest oil spill in US history until the 2010 Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico. While drilling an exploratory well 18,360 feet below sea level, the British Petroleum-operated semi-submersible drilling rig hit methane and exploded, engulfing the platform in flames. A 3-day search failed to recover 11 missing workers, and 94 others were rescued. The Deepwater Horizon sank 2 days later. It took months and numerous attempts to contain the continuous stream of oil that spewed into the ocean, darkening the water and staining beaches. Several months after the disaster, the well was declared effectively dead, but it was found to still be leaking in 2012. The spill ravaged wildlife, causing baby dolphins to die at 6 times the normal rate and wreaking havoc on fish populations. In 2016, BP was ordered to pay nearly $21 billion in fines in the largest corporate settlement in US history. 1. Seawise Giant. Built in Japan during the late 1970s, the 1,504-foot-long supertanker TT Seawise Giant was the longest ship ever made, measuring nearly twice the length of the ill-fated RMS Titanic. At 225 feet wide and weighing in at over 621,703 tons, she was also the heaviest self-propelled vessel ever built. Her propeller alone weighed 50 tons, and her rudder weighed 230 tons. The Seawise Giant was too large and heavy to navigate the English Channel, the Suez Canal, or the Panama Canal. By the time it was finished being built, the Greek company that had originally ordered the ship refused to take delivery of it. A lengthy legal battle ensued, and the Japanese shipyard where the vessel was built won the rights to sell it. After launching in 1981 under a Hong Kong-based company, the ship made routine runs between the Middle East and the United States. She enjoyed a relatively uneventful career until the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, when the Iraqi Air Force bombed the vessel off Larak Island in the Strait of Hormuz. It caught fire and sank, and was declared a total loss. The following year, the Norwegian consortium Norman International bought the wreck and towed it to Singapore, where it underwent repairs for 2 years. During that time, the Seawise Giant was renamed the Happy Giant. Once the repairs were finished, Norwegian shipping mogul Jørgen Jara bought the ship for $39 million and renamed it yet again, this time calling it the Jara Viking. It sailed under the Norwegian flag for 13 years before its owner decided that it was becoming impractical and costly to run such a big vessel, and not to mention that it was a pain to navigate. In addition to having to use extreme caution to avoid running aground in places that smaller ships pass through with ease, it took 5 miles for the Jara Viking to come to a stop from its full speed. In 2004, the massive ship was converted into a permanently moored storage tanker called the Nok Nevis. For the next 5 years, it sat in the Qatar Al Shaheen oil field in the Persian Gulf. After outliving its usefulness as a storage vessel, the Nok Nevis was renamed once more as the Mont. In 2010, it was towed on its final voyage to the Alang shipbreaking yard in India, where an estimated 18,000 workers spent a year dismantling it. The ship's 40-ton anchor was saved and given to the Hong Kong Maritime Museum as the only surviving relic of the monstrous vessel. In terms of gross tonnage, the 1,056-foot-long Stella Daisy was the largest ship to ever be lost at sea. Launched in 1993, the Japanese-built vessel originally operated as an oil carrier, before laws requiring double-hulled vessels led to it being repurposed as an ore carrier. It operated in this capacity under the ownership of a South Korean company from 2008 to 2017, when something exploded on the ship and caused it to start taking on water. The Stella Daisy was en route from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to China when the disaster occurred. It began to list heavily and sank 1,500 miles off the Brazilian coast very shortly after the crew radioed for help. 2 crew members were rescued from a life raft. When an extensive search failed to find the remaining 22 crew members, they were presumed dead. Human remains belonging to at least 1 person were found near the wreck in 2019. The cause of the disaster remains a mystery to this day, but experts have speculated that it was likely related to the ship's conversion from an oil tanker to an ore carrier.
Number 10. Atomic bomb dome in Hiroshima, Japan. During World War II, U.S. forces made the decision to drop the very first atomic bombs on the Japanese cities Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The blasts caused devastating damage and had long-lasting effects on the people. Today, there's one building still standing from that time, and it serves as a reminder of this shocking piece of history and the destruction nuclear weapons are capable of. The building was constructed a century ago in 1915 by the Czech architect Jan Letzel. It's called the Atomic Bomb Dome. On June 18, 1945, the dome, also known as the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, was forever changed. The first atomic bomb dropped 525 feet away. The blast was immense, with intense pressure and fiery gusts of winds that engulfed everything in their path. Everyone inside the building was killed on impact. The walls crumbled away in the blast and fires, but the central part with its bronze dome remained standing. Because of this and the shape it formed, residents began calling it the atomic bomb dome. Many buildings bombed during World War II were either repaired or rebuilt, but the atomic bomb dome has been left exactly as it was after the tragic events of that day. The skeletal remains of the building now serve as a solemn reminder of what nuclear weapons can do and have done. Number 9. Coventry Cathedral. During World War II, Coventry, England was a prime target for German bombers. The city was home to many factories that made engines, airplanes, and ammunition the British Army needed to keep fighting. Although the grand Gothic Coventry Cathedral would not be the main focus of attacks, the church was still cautious and set up a group of 12 men called the Coventry Cathedral Guard back in 1940. These men would take turns around the clock to watch over the cathedral in case it came under fire. On November 14, 1940, the conditions for the German planes were excellent, with a bright moon guiding their way to potential targets. Coventry soon had countless incendiary bombs raining from the sky, and its cathedral was no exception. Just under an hour after the first air raid sirens went off, Coventry Cathedral had been hit multiple times, with multiple sections all ablaze. The Cathedral Guard worked tirelessly, throwing sand on any flames they could, but it would be a losing battle. The pews were smoldering and the organ was on fire. When the wooden beams of the roof caught, they created a rain shower of flames over the seating below. The Guard was forced to admit there was nothing more they could do. As the flames settled the next day after fire crews arrived, the cathedral was a burned-out shell. It was a miracle its grand spire was still standing, something which the locals took comfort in, even though 2/3 of the city's buildings had been damaged during the attack. After the war, the decision was made not to repair or demolish the old Coventry Cathedral, but to keep building alongside it. The old historic building now sits close beside its modern counterpart. 2 of the burned beams from the original structure were put together into a cross, which can be seen in the new building today. Number 8. St. Paul's Cathedral. During the Battle of Britain in October 1940, the UK was hit by heavy German bombings. One night, the city of London came under massive attack, and it kept up night after night. During one of these assaults on October 9th, the iconic dome on top of St. Paul's Cathedral in the heart of the city was pierced by a Luftwaffe bomb, destroying the high altar. In another bombing, a missile hit the roof but did not detonate. The brave people of the St. Paul's Watch who protected the cathedral during the war managed to successfully remove the bomb without setting it off. Aside from these incidents, St. Paul's Cathedral remained mainly unharmed in the Blitz's fury. This led to it becoming a symbol of British resilience and spirit, standing tall while buildings around it burned and crumbled to the ground. In 1944, the sound of St. Paul's bells let the people of London learn about the liberation of France, and 35,000 people flocked to the cathedral in 1945 to commemorate the end of World War II in its entirety. Would you like to visit St. Paul's Cathedral? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 7. Ropsha Palace. Ropsha Palace had been a long-standing retreat for royalty. Not far from St. Petersburg, it had been the favored hunting ground for Tsar Nicholas II, the last ruler of the Romanov dynasty and Russia's monarchy. It was also the place Peter III, the husband of the infamous Russian Queen Catherine the Great, met his end after being murdered in 1762. During the siege of Leningrad, it became a retreat for Nazis between 1941 and 1944, thanks to its location having a great view of central St. Petersburg. This allowed the troops stationed at Ropsha to launch artillery strikes on the Russian city below with ease and precision. Being a former royal palace, Ropsha was filled with priceless artwork and expensive architecture. While the Germans were in position here, the items were taken and the once grand palace was practically stripped bare. The palace was finally freed from enemy control on January 19, 1944, but that wasn't the end of the torment for this once decadent building. The Germans fled Ropsha and the surrounding areas after the Leningrad-Novgorod offensive loosened their hold on the area, effectively ending the siege. But they decided they weren't going to leave the palace behind. As they left, they set off explosives, leaving Ropsha Palace in utter ruins. The palace has remained in this state ever since. It will be an expansive task to restore it to its former glory. Not only that, but anyone who chooses to take on the renovations will have to be careful and watch out for leftover landmines and bombs left behind by the palace's uninvited Nazi inhabitants. Number 6. The Royal Opera House in Valletta, Malta. The Royal Opera House in Valletta, Malta was a beautiful example of neoclassical architecture featuring ornate columns, grand archways, and detailed stone carvings. Construction was completed back in 1866, and it became a cultural landmark for the island nation, not only for the grand scale of the building, but for the many performances held here by artists from all parts of the globe. But just 7 years later, the first tragedy would strike. The theater went up in flames on May 25, 1873 during rehearsals for Giuseppe Privatera's opera La Vergine del Castello, and its interior was extremely damaged. Thankfully, repairs were made within 4 years and it reopened in 1877. It switched to electricity as a safer alternative to gas lighting in 1895. Audiences would enjoy many more performances at this venue in the coming years, but the curtains would finally close in 1942. On the evening of Tuesday, April 7, 1942, the theater was destroyed in airstrikes by Stuka dive bombers. The once beautiful and grand theater space and a majority of its facades crumbled into rubble, with only the sturdy stone base of the building and some columns left standing. The pride and joy of the city of Valletta had been reduced into ruins. There were many proposals over the following years to reconstruct and renew the Royal Opera House. None were successful, though, until 2013, when the remains of the structure were used to form an open-air theater space, now known as Piazza Teatro Regal. Number 5. The Reichstag. Positioned at the north end of the Abertstraße and near the Spree River's south bank, the Reichstag is one of Berlin's most recognizable sights and tourist attractions. But this building has a long history behind it, most notably from World War II. Construction was completed in 1894, and the building was used as the seat of the German government. Built in neoclassical style, it had imposing columns, large windows, and to crown everything off, a large glass dome on the roof's center. The Reichstag served as the seat of democracy until 1933, when an event happened that would shape not only the building, but the fate of the world. A month after Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor on February 27th, a fire broke out in the Reichstag. With the building and symbol of democracy dramatically damaged, this ironically paved the way for the start of the Nazi regime, since the blaze served as the perfect opportunity to dispose of potential rivals and threats. The parliament was moved to another location, and the Reichstag was left in ruins. To add insult to injury, the building was also the target of Allied bombings during the war, furthering its desperate state. In the years after World War II, the Reichstag sat neglected until the 1970s, when it was turned into a museum for German history. 20 years later, in 1990, after the reunification of Germany, the Reichstag was returned to its former glory by an architect named Norman Foster and became a seat of government once again. Number 4. Benedictine Abbey of Monte Cassino. The origins of the Benedictine order of monks sprouted in the Italian town of Cassino. First built in 529 AD, the Monte Cassino monastery sat at the top of a hill overlooking the town below. Although it had gone through many repairs over the many years, at the start of World War II, the abbey building itself was at least 400 years old, having been constructed around the 16th or 17th century. Inside the building were many priceless manuscripts and artifacts created and collected by the monks over almost 1,500 years of history. As World War II broke out and the conflict grew closer towards Monte Cassino, many of the manuscripts were moved to Rome for safety. This proved to be an incredibly wise choice. The monastery and casino would hold out for most of the war, with many attempts to take it failing. By January 1944, the Allied forces were running out of ideas on how to take the monument, strongly believing that it was a German stronghold due to its locations and fortifications. Tragically, this was not the case. Although German forces were camped out on the slopes below, the only people inside the monastery were 2 monks and some scared citizens from the town that were taking shelter there. On February 15, 1944, Allied bombs carried by B-17, B-25, and B-26 planes rained down on Monte Cassino. The structure was decimated, with only a few walls left standing. The statue of Saint Benedict in the center did manage to survive, but it had been brutally decapitated. The 2 monks managed to live, but 115 civilians did not. The bombing of Monte Cassino remains one of the most controversial decisions the Allied forces made during World War II. Ironically, after the site's destruction, the Germans did occupy the site, but never while it stood proud as the flagship of the Benedictine order. Number 3. Royal Crescent, Bath. The city of Bath in England is known for its famous Roman bathhouses and its gorgeous Georgian architecture. One of the finest examples of this is the Royal Crescent in the center of the city. This row of terraced buildings are linked together in a semicircle surrounding a lush, green park and have been a backdrop for many movies and TV shows. To start, Bath was seen as a safe location during World War II, unlike the nearby port city of Bristol. As a result, many evacuees from larger cities like London were sent there to avoid the bombing raids. On April 25, 1942, the sirens began to wail in the historic city. The people initially didn't think anything was wrong and that the actual target would be Bristol, since it always had been. But as the bombs started to fall, the masses frantically ran to seek shelter. But why was Bath getting bombed? On March 28, 1942, the British Air Force bombed the German port city of Lübeck, which was a historical town with wood homes. This raid destroyed 40% of them. Hitler was enraged and promised payback. Bath was the perfect target. Many buildings were destroyed and over 400 people lost their lives. Among them were some houses on the Royal Crescent, their insides stripped by the incendiary bombs. Many buildings and areas were devastated for many years after the war. Thankfully, the houses of the Royal Crescent were restored, but many structures still needed to be fully rebuilt, but were sadly never replaced. Number 2. The city of Hamburg and Operation Gomorrah. The city of Hamburg in Germany was a prime target for Allied forces during World War II. As the country's main port, an industrial center, and the location of many important German shipyards and U-boat pens, it was the perfect striking point. But not many expected how badly Hamburg would be destroyed. In the last week of July 1943, Operation Gomorrah commenced. Over 8 days, 8 square miles of the city would be completely obliterated. Although the bombers used plenty of explosives, over 9,000 tons worth, the main source of devastation came from the bombing's firestorm, with the winds sweeping the flames through the city. The flames were so powerful that one survivor, Paul Peters, reported that the firestorm was so strong that hats were torn off heads and whirled through the air like burning fireballs. Even little children running around alone were bodily picked up from the ground and thrown through the air. 1 million people escaped from Operation Gomorrah, but a staggering 42,600 people lost their lives and another 37,000 received injuries. To put that into perspective, over 5,000 people were dying every single day in one city alone. Once the fires died down and the damage was surveyed, over 60% of Hamburg had been razed to the ground. Number 1. Buckingham Palace. Bombing in World War II was so extensive that not even royalty escaped its clutches. When you pair that with the infamous Friday the 13th date, the story gets even more incredible. On Friday the 13th, September 1940, the King and Queen of England, George IV and Elizabeth, mother of the recently deceased British Queen, were enjoying breakfast with a cup of tea. Their peace and quiet would soon be disturbed by the screaming sounds of a bomb falling before 5 explosive missiles hit Buckingham Palace and the capital city of London. They managed to destroy the Royal Chapel, Inner Quadrangle, Palace Gates, and the Queen Victoria Memorial. Despite this and more bombings over the coming months, the royal family remained resilient, with the Queen even noting that she could now sympathize with those in the East End of London, whose homes had been targets during the Blitz. Even in the face of calls by government officials to leave the country for safety, the royal family refused to leave Buckingham Palace. The Queen even made a statement saying, "The children will not leave unless I do, I shall not leave unless their father does, and the King will not leave the country in any circumstances whatever." Although it was hit many more times and was an attractive target for German strikes, Buckingham Palace never received lasting significant damage and casualties were few. Instead, the building stood as a symbol of British resilience in the face of the terrifying Blitz. Number 7. Ice ship. After a Google Earth user found what's believed to be a 400-foot ice ship 99 miles nestled in an iceberg off the coast of Antarctica, conspiracy theories erupted like wildfire on social media back in 2020. The ice construction was located on Google Earth south of New Zealand and remarkably resembles a cruise ship with a row of windows on its sides. The eerie likeness has given rise to a number of conspiracy theories, some of which speculate on what this supposed ship was doing in the icy continent in the first place. Others wonder if there's something hidden under the ice's surface. The video explaining this find was initially shared by Mr. MBB333, a YouTuber who identifies as an Earth watchman. He said that when you look down on it, the shape of a ship can be seen. He claims this one is 428 feet and seems to be an ice ship sitting off the coast of Antarctica. Many people suggested the structure could have been formed by a shipwreck under the ice, while some thought the YouTuber discovered the biblical landmark of Noah's Ark. Some users said the discovery resembled an undercover vehicle, while others claimed it to be the wreckage of an old Nazi base from World War II. Government cover-ups, the Bermuda Triangle, and military participation were among other crazy theories. What's yours? Number 6. Desert breath. A rare and enigmatic space object has been closely photographed and observed by astronomers, which has reignited interest in learning more about the object's origin. Massive rings of radio waves are known as odd radio circles, or ORCs for short. There have only ever been 5 seen and documented, but never in such amazing detail. Some Google Earth users were curious as to the origin of the unusual spiral. According to Live Science, the cluster of dots that make up the spiral over the top of the Egyptian desert are part of an environmental art piece that was constructed back in March 1997. The artwork, Desert Breath, occupies 100,000 square meters near El Gouna in the eastern Sahara Desert close to the Red Sea. It's situated between the water and a body of mountains at a point where the vastness of the sea meets the desert. The work acts on 2 separate levels in terms of viewpoint, from above as a visual picture and from the ground as a physical experience where you can traverse the spiral track. 2 interconnecting spirals radiating from a common center are made using accurate positive and negative conical sand volumes like mounds and holes. Sand wind is blowing off the cone-shaped hills in Desert Breath, a feature the designers intentionally created to represent the passing of time. A vivid blue lake that used to fill the spiral's core has since dried up along with other elements that have been blown away by the strong winds. It's not the first time a Google Earth user has been confused by a picture. Users were surprised to learn of a monument to UTA Flight 772 in the Tenere era of the Sahara Desert. The DC-10 aircraft's real size was 260 feet, and it was built of black stones that pointed in the direction of the plane's intended flight route. In 1989, a bomb placed in the plane's baggage compartment caused a flight from Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo heading towards Paris to crash over a remote region of Niger. The accident site was 400 miles from any local towns, and the wreckage is still there today, sitting among the sand dunes left to be forgotten. Have you ever seen this on Google Earth? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. Swastika-shaped buildings. After Adolf Hitler and his evil fascist government slaughtered millions of innocent people, the Nazi swastika gained a bad reputation. Ironically, it was originally used as an Asian peace emblem until the terrible fundamentalist Nazi party stole it for themselves. But in the minds of many, the symbol now represents hatred, and in certain nations after World War II, it's even been outlawed. So it would naturally be assumed that architects would want to avoid designing houses and businesses with a layout similar to the infamous Nazi symbol. But the introduction of Google Earth has shown that swastika-shaped structures are present and common worldwide. Owners and designers say that the layouts are mainly accidents, but some believe architects were intentional with their choices. They just may not have anticipated the development of the internet, which lets anybody examine the satellite photographs of any location. Unsurprisingly, several of these oddly constructed buildings have inspired conspiracies. The Coronado Naval Amphibious Base in San Diego, USA is one example of this. You have to wonder how the US military head honchos overlooked such an enormous swastika when the design was presented to them way back in the late 1960s. Since many of them would have participated or at least been closely familiar with World War II, the Nazi insignia must undoubtedly have repulsed them. Today's top officials are rumored to want to change the building's offensive form now that it can be seen on Google Earth. Although they insist it was just a simple mistake, Israeli-American academic Avram Segol has his doubts. Segol told reporters that the V-1 and V-2 rockets, which rained death and damage on southern Britain toward the end of the war, were developed by former Nazi scientists who were honored by the buildings. It turns out German scientists had a key role in starting the US ballistic missile program as well as the space program after the Third Reich's reign of terror collapsed. Another building that resembles a swastika is the Decatur, Alabama-based Wesley Acres Methodist Retirement Home. It's more than likely that many World War II veterans passed away here, but did they even realize they were housed inside the walls of a big Nazi symbol? The retirement home is situated in a tranquil and calm part of Alabama. It was built in 1980 after being designed in the middle of the 70s. 2 expansions were built in a short time after its initial construction, but it is undeniable that it resembles a swastika. Some say, once again, that it probably pays respect to the German scientists who were relocated to the nearby city of Huntsville after 1945. You've probably heard some strange things about the Denver airport, whether it was about its obscene murals, its miles of underground structures, or its shape, which is similar to the swastika. This oddity is seen clearly while looking at the facility in Google Earth. Even though the architects had 34,000 acres to work with, the space-saving layout is obviously fashioned like the famed symbol. In addition, artist Leo Tanguma created a number of vibrant murals throughout the airport that at first glance appear to be in good taste, but they clearly have hidden intentions. According to Daily Star Online, conspiracy theorists think the mural's imagery and themes foretell a grim future for humanity. From Google Earth, you can see more structures with similar designs all around the globe. They include, but are not limited to, the Duquesne Court in Balham, London, the Swastika Estate in Munich, Germany, and the Kenyatta National Hospital in Nairobi, Kenya. There may even be one in your hometown. Number 4. Triangular UFO. Aliens have long been a controversial subject, so some astronomers and scientists have been working hard to demonstrate how extraterrestrial life forms have succeeded in providing us with enough evidence to support their existence. In terms of UFO sightings, 2017 was a pretty exciting year. There were allegations that a UFO was seen on Google Maps and Google Earth, but there have been sightings for decades. In Australia, a large triangle with brilliant lights on its edges was also spotted. People who believed in extraterrestrial life took a keen interest in this triangular UFO when it was initially spotted back in 2007. People stated the object seen floating over the Earth in the video was actually a triangle-shaped UFO, but after a closer look, it was discovered that Alvernia Studios was behind everything. Projects involving movies, video games, and music are produced at this entertainment studio. A weird white object was noticed in an old NASA shuttle launch video, which made news in 2011. The aircraft was described as an extraterrestrial spaceship by UFO seekers and believers. believers. In 2017, the old video was published again on NASA's official YouTube account. It features the White Knight satellite, which is rumored to be an extraterrestrial aircraft that has allegedly been circling Earth for thousands of years. Do you think UFOs are real? Number 3. The Badlands Guardian. The geomorphological feature known as the Badlands Guardian is situated close to Medicine Hat in the southeast region of Alberta, Canada, and with the assistance of Google Earth, Len Hickox found the spot back in 2005. The natural feature resembles a human head facing directly westward while wearing a complete indigenous kind of headdress when viewed from above. It's been claimed that more man-made structures mimic the figure wearing headphones. The apparent headphones are actually just a road and an oil well that are anticipated to disappear after the project is abandoned. The head is a drainage feature likely produced by the impact of wind and water on soft clay-filled soil. Soft sediments, sparse plant life, and irregular but powerful rain showers are characteristics of these desert badlands. The head could have been formed from a short period of rapid erosion that came after a heavy downpour. The hollow face illusion is evident in photographs, which make it look convex when it's actually concave. This valley was created by the erosion of a layer of clay. It's said to be at least a couple hundred years old. As it happens, CBC Radio 1 surveyed potential titles for the structure in 2006. 7 names were recommended to the Cypress County Council from among the 50 submitted. The suggested Guardian of the Badlands was changed to Badlands Guardian. What name would you give it? Number 2. Target in the Nevada Desert. The technology behind Google Earth has come a long way since it first launched in 2001, making it easier than ever to explore the world's surface. With satellite imagery mapping the globe, far-flung corners of the Earth have been made accessible to the general public. There are still some areas, though, that will always remain secret, having been blocked by Google Earth's database. Many users use the tool in an attempt to uncover the world's mysteries, like one spooky symbol spotted in the Nevada desert. The state of Nevada is home to vast stretches of desert and the vibrant tourist city of Las Vegas. A sizable target-like structure can be seen etched into the earth south of the Nevada Triangle in the middle of the barren desert. With no additional indications identifying a possible use, the visible target sign, which is generally associated with shooting, is present. There are reportedly a number of desert air bases with insignia identical to this all around the US, though. Usually, ordinary concrete and asphalt slabs are marked in a similar odd way, but occasionally, as this example suggests, they include target symbols. These remnants of the past are scattered over the landscape and are known to have acted as aerial photo calibration targets. The website Twisted Sifter claims the United States and NASA produced a sizable number of them back in the 50s and 60s. It's already been reported that a mysterious symbol was found in the desert. A particularly unsettling drawing was also discovered in Chile's Atacama Desert. When viewed up close, the unusual symbol appears to be some kind of animalistic creature, but from a distance, it's difficult to label. The enormous animal, sometimes known as the Atacama Giant, leaves a haunting imprint on its surroundings. Although it's difficult to see at first, the giant is surrounded by over 5,000 smaller symbols and artwork in the desert that are all about 390 feet tall. Number 1. Odd circular shape. Google Earth users have reported seeing a circular structure lying on the sea floor, but it's likely not an extraterrestrial craft. The sighting was reported by Scott Waring, the owner of UFOsightingsdaily.com, and a regular finder of artifacts he believes are 100% evidence of past extraterrestrial life. He claims to have discovered a variety of objects on Mars, ranging from a monkey to the 24-foot-tall body of a Martian monarch who was killed in combat a million years ago. He also enjoys looking over photos taken by NASA's rovers. The underwater shapes location is off the coast of Peru, close to the massive geoglyphs called the Nazca Lines that the Nazca people created over 2,000 years ago. This proximity ups the ante in terms of UFO sightings. What exactly did Waring find? A 4.2-mile diameter circle can be seen around 352 miles off the coast of Lima. The circle seems to rise like a hill or mountain from the ocean floor, but this little blip on the ocean floor is probably a data artifact. In Google Earth, strange patterns can develop on the ocean floor for a variety of reasons. The business maps out the seabed using information from many sources. These sources have various resolutions or levels of information, and when they're combined, odd forms sometimes emerge. Thanks for watching. Have you ever seen something weird on Google Earth? Tell us about it in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.